Nobody does depression like me. I'm told I have the greatest of depressions. It's the most amazing depression anyone's ever seen. I'm told it's the best of depressions. Nobody comes close. China cannot even compare. It's the best of anyone has ever seen. The Great Depression. I've already done a video on it. And now I'm doing a video on, is Trump going to actually cause another Great Depression? And even if he does, should we even care? Should we? I don't know. Well, let's find out. So let's get into it. So, in 2002, Bush put tariffs on steel. In 2002, George W. Bush placed tariffs on imports of certain steel products in an attempt to protect domestic U.S. steel industry from foreign dumping. So basically, China. Actually, I don't think it was. Was it actually China? I'm pretty sure it was China. Yeah, it is China. So, China. The failure of these tariffs to work as designed and the economic harm they caused provided a foreboding tale of what we should expect to see result from Trump's and on steel and aluminum. Research the unintended consequences of the U.S. steel import tariffs. I might take a look at this because more sources, the more you get to the source, the better. Generally, in my opinion. A quantification of the impact due to 2 months. More American workers lost their jobs due to higher steel prices than the total number employed by the U.S. steel industry itself. Okay. Important. Very important. If this loss on steel tariffs has anything to do with long-term impact tariffs are higher presence, small quantities of U.S. consumers have lost business, reduced employment, and slower economic growth. Okay, also important. So basically, what I'm getting from this, and way that what it's saying. Well, hang on. Let's finish it. There's not too much more. George W. Bush was on Broadway steel products in March 2002. It lasted for 3 years and 1 day. Wait a second. Hold up. That might have been the Obama tariff. No, I thought it was the Bush. Bush steel tariff duration. And we're lifted by. The tariffs took effect March 20 and were lifted by Bush on December 4, 2003. Huh? But wait a second. Why steel tariffs when Bush was president? Political. Very anti-Republican. Generally, at least. When George W. Bush tried to save the steel industry in 2002 by raising tariffs on selected steel products, many Republican business groups say the result was a disaster. And actually, I have this later on anyway, so. We'll just go ahead and skip around a little bit then, actually. Alright, so. When George W. Bush tried to save the steel industry in 2002 by raising tariffs on selected steel products, many Republican business groups say the result was a disaster. Much of were lost in the state. The states he sought to help suffered, and then tariffs were overturned. Okay. Now, this is, we're all going through the same thing. History selection, blah, blah, blah. The move has eroded the goodwill. The move also wrote the goodwill that countries felt for the United States after its tiny long time and helped cement the idea of Bush as a cowboy, unilateralists who cared little about what the rest of the world thought. I mean, people now, a lot of Americans now, probably majority of Americans now, just don't particularly like Bush. Senator Lamar Alexander, Tennessee Republican, tried to use that history as cautionary tale last month, and he described how after Bush all apartment managers left the U.S. so they could make their parts with cheaper stone and ship them back to the U.S. I mean, they were doing that even before, right? I'm pretty sure. I think that they were doing. Let's go ahead and take a look. So, auto parts manufacturers left the U.S. Okay, let's verify this. Did auto part manufacturers leave the U.S. before 2002? Automotive industry in the United States. So let's go ahead and try to take a look at this. Starting with at least. So this is not what I'm looking for. 1960s, beginning in the 1970s, a combination of high oil prices and increased competition from foreign oil manufacturers severely affected U.S. companies. In the ensuing years, U.S. companies periodically bounced back. But by 2008, the industry was in turmoil due to open menaces. As a result, General Motors, a very aggressive organization, were bailed out with loans. Yeah, we remember the bailouts. This was Obama. We remember this. June 2014, too big to fail, and we remember it. June 2014, seasonally adjusted. This is not answering what I'm looking for. Prior to the 1980s, manufacturing facilities were owned by Big Three, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and AMC. Okay. I was like, wait a second, hang on, and I've got different AMC. The U.S. market shares has dropped steadily as numerous foreign car companies had built factories in the U.S. As of 2012. Toyota had 31,000 U.S. employees compared to Ford's 80,000, Chrysler 71,000. Okay. I mean, 2012. This is still not answering my question. Looking for basically 1970s to 2000s, basically looking to see if there was a lot of outsourcing, essentially. The American automakers in the 1970s and 80s stumbled badly, going from one engine manufacturing market to disaster, and this time often referred to as the malaise era of American auto design. I don't know if I said that right. By 1969, Porsche increased their share in the U.S. auto market with smaller and expensive vehicles. Yeah. Volkswagen sold over 500,000 vehicles, followed by Toyota. In 1986, South Korea entered the American market in response to this domestic car. So blah 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 blah. It's not answering what I want. Because what we're trying to verify is try to use that history as a cautionary. He described how after Bush's tariffs were put in place, auto part manufacturers left the U.S. That's what we're trying to verify, and having a bit of a tough time verifying that. So we're looking specifically at the 2000s, at the 2000s, and actually, that's specifically what we're looking at. I'm probably okay. Began with a recession in 2001, blah, blah, blah. In 2005, oil. In 2001, Chrysler discontinued Plymouth brand. In 2004, ended our Oldsmobile division. This doesn't answer the question. Okay, so Wikipedia not answering question. What a surprise. Decline and resurgence of the U.S. auto industry. EPI.org. Economic Policy Institute.org. Number of themes emerged. Time frame. Over the last 30 years, so 1995. Unless... Oh, what? Okay, so 1985. Okay, well, we're just trying to verify that statement was even correct. That's all that I'm trying to do right now. The harness and this there are two habits pivotal forwards progress from okay. Begin post bargaining generating innovative programming blah 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 for driving standard blah blah. So proposed blah blah blah. Fast forward to 2008 when the results of the frontline engagement were increasingly evident. Even 50,000 severance packages depart from the company during the downturn. Quality made year-over-year improvements. The UAW again. I think that's the unionized auto workers, maybe. I don't know. Union auto workers. I don't know. Again, raise the idea of hourly. It probably says it up here somewhere. I'm just too lazy. Hourly black belts and this time security to use protocol 35 hourly worker. Yeah, so this is not really answering it either. Second, it highlights the auto industry capacity for research. When Congress and the Obama industry were debating a bailout of the auto industry, was seen as troubled in ways comparable to the financial sector industry, were berated for flying corporate jets to test before Congress, blah, 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 revealed just how little they knew about the industry and raw labor and management and working to transform economy, blah, blah, blah. Unlike the financial, blah, 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 blah. Okay, not answering it. Not answering it. You kind of blah 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 blah. Yeah, this is not a historical comparison. 2006. Was the catalyst at the began in 2006. Blah blah blah. Okay, season. Adjusted U.S. vehicle sales. That's not what I'm looking for. The blah. Road labor costs and labor work rules. The evolution of fringe. The evolution of work rules. Role of collective bargaining. The unions. The hectare shaping industry in recent decades. Transplants, shifting geography and supplier relations, arrival transplants, and shifting industry. Okay, so now we're starting to get more towards it. The 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. A lot of people do not like NAFTA. Accelerated the growth of auto component production and auto assembly plants in Mexico. Oh, what? What is that? What? Auto? Mexico? What? Huh. I feel like I've heard that before. And to some degree, Canada. Yeah, we've heard. Yeah. Political and market pressure on Japanese and European and later Korean manufacturers to reduce imports to the United States also has led to a rising number of transplants supplying auto components and assembling autos. So I'm pretty sure. Let me just verify. Transplants, though. I would like to verify. What are transplants? Plants in industry. In industry, transplant refers to a manufacturing plant, particularly in that is owned and operated by a foreign company, but located in a foreign company like the United States. So basically, what this is saying refers to a manufacturing plant that is owned, let's say, by GM, and operated in a foreign company by a foreign company. So manufacturing plant that is owned by GM, operated by a foreign company, but located in a foreign company like the United States. These plants are so. Why am I having? Why the wording on the, like, I know what it is, but like the wording on it is like trying to confuse me, which is odd. Anyway, so basically, manufacturing plant that is owned by GM and operated by by GM, but located in a foreign country like Mexico or Canada, which is what we're talking about. These plants are set up to circumvent tariffs, reduce shipping costs, and establish a local presence. Or you can go the other route of a manufacturing plant that is owned and operated by a foreign company, so GM, that is owned by GM and operated by GM, but located in China. Okay. Refers to a manufacturing plant. I'm pretty sure that's I'm pretty sure that's what it is. When did the automobile industry decline? U.S. auto industry. This is Google AI. This is Google. So like, you know, U.S. auto industry profits suffered from 1971 during the Vietnam general recession in the late 1970s, which impacted profits from 1981 to 1983. During and after the Gulf War, which industry profits declined from 1991 to 1993, and during the Iraq War from 2001 to 2003 and 2006 to 2009. So even like everything is already saying like, no, stuff was happening before Bush even did his tariffs. No, that's not right. Stuff was happening even after Bush's tariffs were already gone because they only lasted for a bit over a year. So no, that is not a very accurate statement, is basically what this is saying. So Bush's tariffs were put in place. Auto part manufacturers left the U.S. so they could make their parts with cheaper steel and then ship them back to the U.S. Was already happening. It started in, what was it, 1993 with NAFTA. Literally just pulled that up. We literally just saw it. And let's go ahead and just verify again. The more you verify and the more sources you use to verify, the more you can say it is true. So, when or did NAFTA cause auto companies to transplant? Google again, but car makers from Europe, Japan, and the U.S. all partner with shell companies in Mexico to manufacture for export back to these major markets. Since NAFTA was enacted, the country's automobile exports have tripled. Wow. And Mexico is now the 8th largest vehicle producer in the world. I feel like I've heard this before. How NAFTA drove the auto industry south. One of the clear benefits of NAFTA in these 2 decades has been 2 decades, so 1993, has been the Mexican automobile industry. Ford, Nissan, Honda, and Audi are just some of the companies expanding production south of the border. So all the major car companies taking advantage of NAFTA to manufacture in Mexico, essentially. As NPR's Soneri Glinton reports, it's all been part of a southern shift in Northern America over the last 40 years. Okay, Mexico has had an auto industry since the 1920s, but it really started getting big after NAFTA brought down many trade barriers between. Okay, so basically companies were taking advantage of NAFTA and switching and transplanting using Mexico as the primary country with a bit of Canada, so that way they can still sell in the U.S. markets, but with cheaper labor and whatnot, and also just using them as surrogates, using Mexico primarily as surrogate. Okay, so this not exactly wrong, but also very inauthentic. All right, so let's get back to this. Well, I already kind of went over this. Okay, so let's get back to this. President George imposed tariffs on a variety of steel products, being blah blah blah. Blah blah blah. The rates range from 8% to 30% on certain steel products from all countries except Canada, Israel, wow, Jordan, and Mexico. These tariffs affected products used by U.S. steel-consuming manufacturers, including producers of fabricated metal, machinery, equipment, transportation equipment and parts, chemical manufacturers, petroleum refiners, and contractors. Wait, hold on. The list is not done. My bad. Tire manufacturers and non-residential construction companies. Okay. So basically, we all know steel is used in so many different things. We all know this. And in so many different ways. Steel is one of the most important resources generally that is traded. And it has been for well over a century at this point. Okay. This definition of steel consumers is conservative, as many other industries are also consumers of steel. The vast majority of manufacturers that use steel in their business process are small businesses. 98% of the 193,000 U.S. firms in steel-consuming sectors at the time of Bush steel tariffs employed less than 500 workers. So, U.S. steel industry before Bush tariffs, very decentralized, a lot of very big and very decentralized, essentially. According to the study above, the economic implication of such small firm size meant that these businesses were price takers. In other words, the firms were too small to have the market power to influence prices and so had to accept the higher input costs caused by tariffs. So they didn't have the financial resources to influence legislators, essentially. I am pretty sure that's what this is saying, which is probably a good thing, to be honest. The effects of higher steel prices, largely a result of the steel tariffs, led to a loss of nearly 200,000 jobs in the steel consuming sector, a loss larger than the total employment of 187,500 in the steel producing sector at the time. That in the steel consuming sector and steel producing sector. Okay. But led to a loss, but not necessarily a loss of jobs in the steel producing sector. That's an important point. Let's go ahead and check. I'm going to take a short intermission though. Okay, I'm back. So, the effects of higher steel prices are largely the result. So, the question is, was the steel production, so industry, protected? So let's try to find out. U.S. steel production industry by... we could try by year, but I don't know if we'll get it. Okay. Max? Tenure? I mean, yeah, but 10 years doesn't go back to 2002. 2006? Sorry, my bad. I mean, this is Wikipedia. I feel like Wikipedia might not be reliable on that. The rise of U.S. Okay, here we go. This looks like something. So 2000 Mills post 1980, Mills pre 1980, Mills plus import. Okay, so 2002, so like right here. It does look like there was a bit of a decline and then a bounce back. And then around like 2008 or so, like what happened? What year is this? I would see, like, I wish I could see what year that is. Let's see if we can get an even better. The state of steel today. Okay. Over the course of the 20th century, the international production rate of steel saw nothing but increases. In fact, it grew from just 28 million tons a year at the beginning of the century to a staggering 781 tons by 1999. However, while the U.S. helped play a major role in the increase of output over this time period, by the end of the 20th century, we were producing less than 6% of the world's steel. So, over courses, so even though we were producing a lot of it, it was still not. Yeah, but that's not what we're really quite looking at. We're just looking at, was the industry protected at all by Bush's tariff? And something else that I want to look at is I think it was in this article that I saw. Where costly consumers, but at a cost to consumers on balance. Part of the reason tariffs affect it's not on balance, the policy has not been nearly as helpful to the U.S. steel industry as partisans hoped. At the same time, it is not nearly as bad as some steel consumers and foreign exporters may have feared. So not as helpful, but also not as bad as people were trying to. Basically, propaganda from both sides. Wow. Not a surprise. Nevertheless, the policy should be dramatically changed and coming on. So, blah, blah, blah. Part of the reason tariffs' effect on domestic manufacturing and trading was not as bad as expected was that Bush began granting exclusions almost as soon as they were in place. Okay. That was in response to angry steel-consuming companies where they would not be able to get the product they needed. Okay, so basically, let's put tariffs, but we're not actually going to require companies to pay them. Wow! It was such an effective tariff. Wow. By the end of 2002, the Commerce Department had excluded about 25% of the 14 steel product lines covered by Bush's order, representing roughly 3.5 million short tons of imported steel under the banner of the consumer manufactured posters. Bush's tariffs covered of non-steel manufacturers that was more than the total employment industry, which was a blah, blah, blah. Okay. The biggest job losses were blah, blah, blah. That's not what we're looking for. Those industries, however, believe the trade partnerships estimates of job losses from the Bush were grossly exaggerated. Again, more basically propaganda. But who knows? These are opinions, basically. These are opinions. These are not based off of numbers necessarily. There was no harm to any other industry, no harm, zero job losses, no anybody quoting anything different than numbers. Dan DiMiccio, a former steel industry executive, is one of Trump's strongest trade partners. Any job losses that might have occurred because we were in a recession, not because of the steel prices from the tariffs. Hey, you know what? That's actually somewhat of a valid argument. Does that mean it's true? Probably not. I'm sure that probably did cause some job loss, but it's actually a valid point. Maybe, so basically, maybe it was only 90% of it was the job losses were caused by it. Maybe only 10% of the job losses were caused by it. But it is a valid point that that job losses might have occurred because we were in a recession and not necessarily due to the tariffs. I think that's a valid point. I think that is. Unfortunately, I don't have numbers. I'm not an economist. I can't tell you, yes, this is true. No, this is not true. Oh, this is exactly what happened. Unfortunately, I can't tell you. I am trying to, and that is why I am researching, to try to find as correct of an answer as I am capable of finding. In 2002, Dimitri was chair of Nucor Corp, one of the largest U.S. steel companies, and the leader of the charge for import relief. However, Dimitrio's memory that the U.S. was in recession in 2002 conflicts with the facts. The U.S. economy grew 1.9% that year and 3.0% in 2003, according to Commerce Department data. Right. But did so the question is, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So, and we've seen, so something that we've seen recently as well is that even that if you just look at the U.S. economy as a blanket and just look at the overall growth and percentage and stuff like that, it's going to include the stock market and trading and stuff. And we know that 93% of the stock market is owned by the top 10%. So if the stock market grew significantly and overcompensated for the job losses and other losses in the industry, in the U.S. economy, it doesn't translate to the vast majority of Americans, because it's primarily the top 10% that are gaining money and not the vast majority of Americans. So vast majority of Americans might have been in a recession, while the ultra wealthy and the elite and the top elites were booming. And because they had so much money and wealth and had consolidated so much of it, that their booming not only compensated for the recession of the working class and anybody else, but it even went beyond that, presenting statistics of the U.S. economy growing despite vast majority of Americans being in a recession. Almost like a class war. That's kind of what I'm seeing from this. And we've seen this recently too. I mean, this is still applicable. This has been a thing for a very long time, actually. A very long time this has been a thing. This is not new. This has been an issue for over a century. Over a century, this has been an issue. I mean, this has been an issue basically since. This has been a very long, very, very long standing issue. And this is why I'm also asking, like, do we even care if like the U.S. economy overall, on an overall statistic, goes into even a depression if the vast majority of Americans aren't actually in the depression or even in a recession? Should we even care? So, should we care? So, even if Trump's tariffs cause the market to even crash, but the vast majority of it, but even just the majority of Americans don't feel that, and actually they actually feel the opposite of where they feel wealth coming in, where they feel an income of wealth. Should we even care? Like, honestly, like, they can afford to take a hit. They can afford to take a hit. They've not only that, but they've been taking advantage of the working class by basically importing cheap labor and forcing American citizens to have to undercut cheap labor that is undercutting them, causing issues of where we're having to work 60, 80, if you're lucky, 60 hours a week to not just survive, to not just barely survive, but actually like be able to like be even somewhat comfortable. And again, that's if you're lucky. Like, there's so many people that are working 2 jobs and whatnot. And that's why unemployment's down too. Like, people say, oh, well, unemployment's only at 3%. Unemployment's actually at a pretty low number. It's not very, yeah, because people are working 2 jobs. And the people that are not willing to work for 80 hours a week, they're being compensated because people have to, because those people are lucky in that they're able to hold out and not give away basic near slave labor rate level of work. They're lucky and they're able to hold out, while people who aren't lucky like that have to do that, and they're having to work 2 jobs or whatever. And so, yeah, on paper it looks like unemployment's down, but it's not fair to those people who can't find a job, that are using up the savings that they had, or whatever safety net they had, because they don't want to work as near slaves. And the people that don't have that safety net do, it's not really fair to either of them. And the only people that really are actually like benefiting from it in the sense of like actually not having to do so and not having a worse worse wealth or worse compensation rate and whatnot are the people are the CEOs and the executives and the top 10% who own 93% of the stock market. Like, why should we even care if the stock market crashes? Like, yeah, I mean, over half of the Americans have at least a little bit of stock at the least. Like, yeah, and so like, yeah, of course. I mean, everybody, even non-top 10% people are going to feel it and whatnot. But I mean, like in comparison, yeah, they're gonna take a hit, but they're not gonna take nearly as big of a hit as the top 10%. Because they have so little of it anyway. And because it's been consolidated by the top 10%. Like, so, like, should we even care? Like, yeah, we'll take a bit of a hit. People will take a bit of a hit, but hey, yeah, they'll take a bit of a hit, but they've been screwed anyway. Might as well screw over the top 10%, right? Screw it. Who cares? The problems caused by China's flooding the market with cheap steel are even more severe today, he says. China went from producing less than 200 million tons of steel in 2002 to more than 800 million tons annually now. That has inundated global markets with lower production, and put stress on steel sectors around the world, Demetrio said. Okay. So, even though Bush's steel tariffs lasted 18 months and were weakened with exclusions, they gave the U.S. industry valuable time to restructure and become stronger. And this was a dude that was a steel executive. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Nucor Corp. Nucor Corp. Let's say 2002. Let's just see what we find. What we were trying to find is kind of like average wage and employment is really what we're trying to find, right? 2002 wage. Let's try that. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact Nucor wage for 2002 as historical salary data is not easily available. However, you can find information on Nucor's current average salary for comparison, ZipRecruiter. Nucor is known for its innovative employee-focused culture, which has helped it grow from a small steel company to the largest in the United States. You can also find information on Nucor's financial performance and employee statistics on sites like Stock Analysis and Yahoo Finance. So up on one of these tabs, I have this, which will Titan Tire will play into it later, but let's go ahead and take a look at Nucor and see what employees are saying. Nucor Steel. I mean, nobody's gonna watch it anyway. And even if they were, doesn't really matter. Anyway. Maritime Steel and Health Coordinator. Okay, so let's go ahead and Alright, so let's look at the company. 72% above average. Happiness. How enjoyable people find their day-to-day life at work. Average. Satisfaction. How can people feel with the way things are work. Above average. Purpose. Meaningful. How meaningful people find their work. Average. Stress-free. How manageable people find their work stress. Average. This is actually pretty good for Indeed. This is actually pretty good. Ring number one in our industry by fortune. We are North America's most diversified steel and steel products company, but we're also a team forged around a vision for leading our industry by providing unparalleled customer care, building trusted partnerships, and creating sustained value. Back. Mechanical technician. That's pretty good pay. That's pretty good pay. Warehouse person. So definitely jobs in the U.S. Work and life balance 3.3. That's probably, I think that's about average, or even above average on this site. Job security and advancement 3.5. I think that's about average, maybe a bit above. Culture 3.7. That's kind of high. Compensation benefits 4. That's fairly high for the site. Management 3.3. It's about average, even a bit higher, I think, honestly, for the website. So again, I mean, it's above average. Great place to work. Good pay, but hostile work environment. Hardworking employees get rewarded with more work. Management creates a hostile work environment, and yelling is their preferred form of communication. The pay is good, but you end up working 68 hours a week. So, there's always gonna be some people that fall through cracks, some issues that fall through cracks, etc., etc. And it's not discounting it. It's just saying okay, sure. The pay is great. Management clearly shows favoritism, and targeting is allowed in some departments. Overall, lots of good people work for this company. Good pay, not great management. Basically, even their complaining is it could be worse, is basically what they're saying. It could be worse. It's not great, but it could be worse, sure. 1.0 workplace was the best part of working at the company. There wasn't anything I could say about working for that company. Was the most stressed, but there was really nothing satisfying about that job. Was the work environment culture like at the company? Very political and unprofessional, in my opinion. Was your typical day like for you at work? Show up, clock in, do my job, go home. I mean, that sounds fine. This is going to be at any job for the most part. And again, it's not discounting it. It's just saying some people are going to be, there's going to be some exceptions. Some people are going to fall cracks. Some things are going to fall through cracks. But even this 1-star rating is I've seen worse on this site, Horrible place to work with assholes. A typical day at work. Work with control freaks around. What you believe you learn. No one stay away from none. What you believe you learn. None. Stay away from assholes. Asshole management. Or management, dumb freaks. Workplace culture. The hardest part of the job, working with non-brained. What? I guess dumb people. The most enjoyable part of the job, none. Something. You can also say that there's always going to be some employees who just don't quite. It goes both ways at times, sometimes too. And again, that's not discounting any of what this person's saying. It's simply saying there's always going to be things that fall through the cracks. There's always going to be some discontent employees that, there's always going to be something and it's not even necessarily that those employees are bad or that their management is even bad either. It's just that they might not vibe, essentially. Overall, it seems pretty decent that they do employ. It does seem like it used to be higher, to be fair. It does seem like it's taken a bit of a hit. So maybe it's on the downturn, but it did seem like it was pretty good for a while, at least. And even now, it doesn't seem completely bad. One of the better options. So, okay. Fair enough. So this guy, Probably not that bad. Now, now that being said, this was 2002, right? I mean, I don't. Let's go back to it. I don't think it will show. It probably won't show for 2002. I find that hard. Yeah, so it doesn't show it, but it does seem like the company that he worked for, at least, was not the worst. And if anything, it seems like it went up a bit now, but it's going down even more. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna interpret it as maybe it wasn't necessarily the best, but it also wasn't the worst, and it was above average, even if it wasn't much above average. Okay. Trump's plan. Trump's plan, unless it's scaled back when the final details are announced, would impose a 25% blah blah blah. Yeah. I mean, we again. I think the last I saw was 145%, but it does look like today he might have made some exclusions or something. I mean, it's so unpredictable right now. Who knows what's going to be the next hour? Who knows what's going to be between me recording this and me publishing this video? The trade partnership is okay. But the report also forecasts job losses in manufacturers such as fabricating, blah, 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 and as known as construction distribution will take the biggest because demand for this yeah. So yeah, I mean, pretty inconclusive stuff. Some arguments on both sides. I've seen more not objective points, but more detailed points supporting perhaps that his tariffs didn't cause perhaps his tariffs were effective at the time for what they were trying to do, essentially. It's hard to tell, especially since, like, basically his tariffs were not even being enforced, essentially. So it's kind of hard to tell. Okay. So going back to this, U.S. steel markets were generally higher than blah blah. Until the benefit of using protectionist policies is to say very few so in the short run was significantly outweighed by the unintended consequences of other industries. So again, it's saying, yeah, it's not saying that there was job loss in the steel making industry, in the steel producing industry. There was no job. It's saying that it did save jobs. So it's like, I don't know. And this is discount, and this is not, and this also is straight up lying when it says impose a variety lasting for 3 years and 1 day, which is not even true. And then on top of that, it's not talking about the exclusions. And it doesn't talk about the exclusions at all. At least I don't think it does. I don't remember it talking about the exclusions. Very biased. Very biased. But we have one source saying that it was 3 years, one source. No, because we use Google for how long did Bush steal tariffs last? On my place, the tariffs took effect on March 9 and were lifted by Bush on December 4, 2000. Yeah, see, we already went over this. Yeah, so like two sources again saying this is not true. Tried so tariffs, it didn't work. In early 2000, against low cost imports, these tariffs were controllable even as they squeezed. Even as they helped steel makers, they squeezed steel users such as the auto industry. I mean, yeah. They were also seen as hypocritical at a time when the British was trying to encourage other countries to liberalize trade policies and reduce the health, which, I mean, didn't even quite work, I don't think. The general economic view of the protections said blah, blah, blah. I mean, post tariffs, it doesn't say how long it lasted. And I'm looking for, it doesn't say how long it lasted. If you have not drank water for at least an hour, you go and drink water right now. Right now, go and drink some water. On January, blah, 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 blah. Employed, blah, 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 blah. What can be learned? Okay, were imposed on a wide range for a 3-year period based on blah, 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 blah. The tariffs generally exclude blah, 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 blah. From a list of, jeez. So China. Even though I think it was supposed to target China, I guess that maybe it didn't. I don't even know at this point. This case is blah, 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 blah. Does it say whether or not hex not covered blah, 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 and over 2008 combined blah, 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 blah. Overall, there was in the 12 months following the safeguard. Over 2003, the climb 28%. Okay, hang on. For example, in 2000, hang on. This might actually, this case is particular about the potential consequences of the behavior in the Senate. Start with detail shows that the U.S. trade impact was very reflecting numerous exclusions from the measure. U.S. imports of steel from Asia supply plummeted, falling by 20%, and by further 30%. U.S. imports of steel, okay. Even products not covered by the measure are significantly affected. Meanwhile, imports of steel products from countries excluded from the safeguard increased strongly. So they're effective at what they're meant to do. For example, in 2002, the risk was agreement and over the claims. So basically, people circumventing the tariffs. That's what I'm getting from that. Furthermore, imports of a non-safeguard blah 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 blah. Okay. Shares up and okay, yeah. I mean, and removed them in December 2003. So yeah, like it was just, so this is straight up lying. Very biased article. Okay, so then continuing to look at it, because whenever you do tariffs, there's going to be retaliation and whatnot. This is basically what the EU response to Bush's tariffs and deplores the protectionist U.S. decision to impose up to 30%, still inflated, blah, blah, blah. But damaging other still poses around the world, with the exception of countries such as Canada and Mexico. Here's that this follows the pattern which is damaging to the reputation of the USA, harming efforts to build international partnership. But doesn't say that like China's taking advantage of stuff or anything. Condemns the attempt to solve the difficulties condemns this attempt to solve difficulties of the USA's uncompetitive steel industry at the expense of European other steel producers. Takes the view that the EU must not bear the cost of restructuring US, which has been avoided for too long by successfully. I mean, it's true, for sure. Points out that the U.S. delivered without this failure to restructure, as well as inadequate R&D, and still an enormous overhang of so-called legacy customers, and that votes which have fallen by 30% since 1998. So NAFTA, while EU still imports was by 18%. Armament has so NAFTA not helping them, and it seems like there might have been some inefficiencies with. And we were using old manufacturing processes and stuff like that. And as in my previous video was shown, tariffs are a short-term solution to allow industries to develop and catch up in innovation with and stop, and while doing so, and basically give them time to do so. That's basically what they're effective at. And I don't know if Bush put money towards developing the steel industry it needs to, basically tariffs need to coincide with assisting in developing and innovating and catching up in innovation of whatever industry they're trying to protect. They're short-term protection to give time to those industries. They are effective at that. This has been proven. Now, if you just put tariffs are not a magic solution. Just slapping tariffs is not the solution. You need to also put money into R&D and restructuring, as the EU is putting it, and better, more efficient production, essentially. But the tariffs allow an environment for those industries to do so and catch up and be competitive. They're a short-term solution. They're not even a solution. They're a short-term. I'm sure there's a very good word to use for this. I can't think of it at the moment, but they are a short-term protection to enable development and innovation of an industry. That's what they are. They are effective at, and they are effective at doing such. And they can potentially come at the cost of other industries taking that burden due to retaliation, and that needs to be addressed as well. Like, that needs to be thought of before you even do the tariffs. But it doesn't mean tariffs are a bad idea. It just means that you need to look at a very wholesale picture when you're talking about tariffs and stuff. Points to lengthy restructuring involving the loss of tens of thousands of jobs. Points to lengthy restructuring involving loss of tens of thousands of jobs that the U.S. has undergone. Expresses understanding for U.S. and threatening with redundancy, but it suggests that the plan can only be effectively addressed by U.S. government preparation to deal with the problem of legacy costs and use the process of restructuring through training. Social programs comparable to those funded by European restructuring regrets that the U.S. administration had not taken blah, 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 blah. So basically, the EU was doing a lot of social programs and stuff like that to assist in helping people who are losing jobs due to automation and efficiency to allow to help them be employable in other fields and and whatnot and stuff and things, and that and they're I think, and that's probably correct. That's probably the correct way of doing it. That's basically them saying that, like, you need to address, you can't just slap tariffs on and call that a solution. You have to look at it from a wholesale perspective. And that's basically what they're saying. Now, that being said, does that mean, again, tariffs are bad or are not effective and cannot assist that? No, it does not mean that. They can assist. They can make that even, they can assist that and even enable it to a certain extent. But they are a short-term solution. They are a temporary measure. Short-term solution is not even the correct characterization. They are a temporary measure. Emphasizes that while protectionism rarely assists those that is designed to help, these tariffs could penalize other American industry, American consumers. I mean, I think that I feel like they're not. What I'm looking at is that that tariffs are designed to help the workers more than anything. And I feel like this is looking at the companies. And therefore, this is false. It would be true if what they mean by this is the companies, but that it's not but I don't think it's true that tariffs are designed to help companies in the first place. So it's not that it's not that this is a lie or mischaracterization or anything, or it's not that this is a lie or inauthentic statement necessarily. It's more that's a mischaracterization. Because, like, it goes on to talk about American industries and stuff like that, which I think is talking about companies. Fears that these matters will jeopardize the search conducted through the OSID for an internationally agreed solution to problems of overcapacity and state subsidies, calls on the OSID high-level group of issues and its working groups to continue to address these issues at their next meeting. I don't know what OSID is. Here's how the meeting will jeopardize the search. What search? The search conducted through OSID for an international agreed solution to problems of overcapacity and state subsidies. I mean, did it? But this, I feel like this is probably like just a foreign thing. Basically, what I was looking for was what were the exact retaliation tariffs and stuff like that. And I'm seeing Okay, well, let's go ahead and do EU retaliatory tariffs 2002. In retaliation, the European Union threatened to counter with tariffs its own on products ranging from Florida oranges to cars produced in Michigan. If each calculated to likewise hurt the president in a key marginal state. Wow, so basically political tampering. The United States backed down and withdrew the tariff on December 4th. This is Wikipedia. So basically, they were threatening tariffs. They didn't even get to the point of actually enacting tariffs, is what I'm seeing. But they were threatening it, and you basically doing political tampering to get the tariffs withdrawn. Okay. So it seemed like they might have. So it seemed like Bush's tariffs were effective. Conclusion for that: it seems like Bush's tariffs were effective in in maintaining still production, industry. Other industries may have suffered, but may not have necessarily even been due to the tariffs. I mean, I imagine at least some of it was, at the very least, right? At the very least, at least some of it had to be due to the tariffs, right? But how much is debatable, and people don't know. There's arguments on both sides. But basically, but I mean, the steel industry was getting shat on by primarily China. To the point of where Biden him even put tariffs in 2024 on steel and aluminum, I think. But he didn't do it until 2024. And by then it was already too late. In my opinion, it was already pretty much too late. The industry was already gone. And as basically what history was showing is that you have to look at a wholesale perspective. You can't just slap tariffs on and say, "Oh yeah, that's all you need to do and it fixes." No, you have to actually there has to actually be industry stimulation. It doesn't even necessarily mean subsidies from the government or anything, but there has to be industry growth and innovation coinciding with the tariffs. Otherwise, they're not going to fix anything. Okay. Obama got tough on China. Okay, so this is the tires, I think. I'll probably come back and do this another time. This has gone on for longer than I intended. All right, so let's go ahead and skip to let's get to more of the should we even care. Yeah. Did China bypass the Obama era tire tariffs? Well, the question of whether tariffs is complex. It's not as complex as it's saying. The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, but it's questionable how much they did and how effective they were at it. Advantages and disadvantages of the debate. I'm gonna do this. I'm going to do another video, and I'm probably going to backtrack and go over that stuff. Go over the Obama tariffs, go over the World Trade Organization. And then I want to go over Andrew Yang stuff. Trade protection and tariffs from... This is another thing. They keep... Like, people are pointing towards Reagan and stuff like that. And here's the thing. Reagan accepted some protectionist measures to open foreign markets to fair competition for otherwise robust American competitive production, while President Trump can't compete against the blah, blah. This is blah 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 blah. Ronald Reagan first proposed what became the 1993 NAFTA treaty, which Americans in general dislike. Achieved, aside from executives and CEOs and the top and the elites, people don't. The working class does not particularly like NAFTA. During Reagan's presidency, the number of goods without tariffs was sharply reduced. So during Reagan's presidency, the number of goods without tariff into the United States from developing countries was sharply reduced. In other words, Reagan put tariffs on developing countries more than he took tariffs off. Reagan frequently argued publicly in favor of free trade, as seen in this excerpt from blah 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 blah. In his post-presidential memoirs, Reagan cited the disastrous experience with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs during the Great Depression, which I went over in my previous video. And basically, Smoot-Hawley tariffs arguably didn't even put the Great in the Great Depression. Arguably. Now, the general consensus is still, yes, it did. But there's some valid argument of, and from some very famed and successful economists, that while they may have still contributed, they were actually somewhat of a negligible impact on it itself. The tariff itself was. So, if you want to watch my previous video, please feel free to. I don't. I mean, it's a long video. I firmly opposed import quotas. Blah 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 blah. But is this accurate? Strict libertarians and ardent free traders have long criticized Reagan for what they perceived as hypocrisy on trade, as he instigated or signed off on numerous protectionist measures throughout his presidency, starting with his first months in office in 1981. During this period, he persuaded Japan to adopt significant voluntary automobile import restraints, which remained in effect until 1985. During that time, economists estimated that quotas raised car prices for consumers by about $1,000. Incidentally, Arthur Laffer, a Trump supporter, estimates Trump's 25% auto tariff could increase new cars sales by $4,700. Japan was told bluntly that they didn't agree to this. Congress would impose harsher import quotas and extend them to other Japanese products, which was possibly true. Reagan also secured agreements from several European and Latin American nations to adopt similar voluntary quotas on steel exports to the U.S. So more ever since the 1880s, basically, the U.S. has cared about steel. It has been one of the leading industries and has been since the 1880s, essentially. Additionally, Reagan imposed protectionist measures on textiles, specialty steel, Canadian, blah, 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 during his two terms. In 1986, Reagan threatened to impose a 200% tariff on Spain for its restrictions on U.S. grain imports. So basically, Reagan, like, there's a lot of videos and stuff about, oh, Reagan was like all for free trade, blah, blah, blah. He cautioned the government and future presidents about tariffs, blah, blah, blah. He like free trade, free trade. Meanwhile, he put a lot of tariffs on, actually, and threatened even more, and significantly high ones, too. So, yeah. Not very accurate. And that was also the University of Austin, so it should be fairly reliable. Yeah, use. We already went over that. End of it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish the video for now. I'm going to do another video tomorrow going over Obama's tire tariffs and Biden's still tariffs to a certain. I'm probably going to somewhat briefly go over Biden's still tariffs, and then I'm going to go over Obama's tire tariffs and try to see like the outcomes of what they led to and whatnot, because that's the whole point of this, trying to actually understand if Trump's tariffs are going to cause a depression, if we're already on track to be in a depression, essentially, if he's going to put the great in the second Great Depression, or if he's actually going to just prevent a depression or cause it himself. We don't know. This is why we're looking at it. This is why we're looking at it. And right now, from what I'm seeing, is even if he does, should the working class even care? Because there's a strong argument for, even if the U.S. economy, overall economy on paper shrinks, it might not even necessarily mean it's worse for the working class and your average American. So should we even care if we have a Great Depression? If that Great Depression is basically just the stock market, which is just the top 10% pretty much anyway. Since, I'll pull this up real fast before I do end, how much of the stock market does the top 10% own? The wealthiest 10% of Americans roughly own 93% of all household stock market wealth. There you go. So even if the stock market just completely crashes, basically, it's mainly just going to be a huge impact on the top 10%, because 93% of all household stock market wealth is owned by a top 10%. Why should the working class even really care if the stock market just completely crashes? Why should they care?